He was feared by everyone in the city. She was invisible to everyone in the city. One impossible night brought them together, and one terrible secret tore them apart. But here's the truth no one tells you about monsters. Sometimes they are just broken people, waiting for someone brave enough to see past the darkness. Welcome to a channel where we explore the raw, complicated truth about love. Stories about men who built empires on fear but would burn them all down for the right person. About women who chose courage when they had every reason to run. And about families forged in fire. The deepest lesson here: the people most worth loving are often the hardest to reach, but they are also the ones who love the deepest in return. If this story found you at the right moment, like it, share it, subscribe, and leave a comment. Sometimes a single story is exactly what someone needed today. Help me get it to.
Natalie's life in New York was about survival. She was only 23, but her dreams of a better life felt distant. That night, her boss sent her to serve the VIP section at a private event. The party was exclusive, filled with powerful people. For 6 months, serving the city's elite was how Natalie paid her bills. In a city of 8 million, she was happy to be invisible. The club was a world of marble and crystal that made her feel painfully out of place. But the tips could pay for a month's worth of food. At table 12, she saw his security first, men who looked like they lived with violence. Then she saw him. He sat in the middle of it all, a king who needed no throne. He had dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that were both warm and cold. He looked to be in his early 30s, but he seemed much older. When he looked at her, the entire room seemed to shrink. She served the drinks, her voice even. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. He replied with, "Your name." His quiet voice cut through all other conversation. "Natalie," she answered, before she could stop herself. He repeated her name slowly. "I am Adrian." She knew she should leave, but his intense gaze held her in place. He then asked a very strange question. "What does a person like you dream about?" The question caught her completely off guard. She tried to make a joke about her feet being tired. He almost smiled. "Liar," he said. The word felt like an invitation, not an insult. "I should get back to work," she managed. His final words followed her. "I will see you again, Natalie." It was a clear promise. For the rest of the evening, she could feel his eyes on her. It was not scary. For the first time, she felt truly seen. When her shift ended, her manager appeared. "The VIP wants to see you," he said. Against her own better judgment, she found herself going to him. The top-floor suite was stunning, with huge windows that overlooked the city. Adrian stood waiting for her with 2 drinks already poured. "You came," he said. "You asked." She stayed close to the elevator, just in case. He came closer, moving with a controlled grace. He knew she was afraid of him, and even admitted that she probably should be. "What do you want?" she asked. "To know you," he replied. Then he shocked her. He knew about her other jobs, her online degree, and even the money she sent to her mother each month. He confessed he had looked into her life to be sure she was real. In his world, he explained, everyone had an angle. Everyone wanted something from him. But she had treated him like he was just a regular person. The truth is, he said, he was not a regular person at all. When she asked who he really was, he told her. He was a man who solved problems, a man who had built a powerful empire on loyalty and fear. He confessed that when he saw her, he felt something besides a desire for power for the first time in a decade. Natalie should have left. Instead, she agreed to stay for 1 drink. That 1 drink turned into 2, and 2 turned into the night that changed her life forever. Their conversation went into unexpected places. He spoke of ambition, fear, and hope. Adrienne wanted a real connection. "You are not like a criminal," Natalie said. He replied, "What do criminals talk like?" The truly dangerous ones never need to threaten. They just exist, and people move aside. He looked at her with unreadable amber eyes. Hurting you would be like destroying art. The words struck her, warm and terrifying. She stood, needing to leave. Stay, he pleaded, his voice vulnerable. That single word broke through her defenses. Why? She asked, her voice a whisper. Because you see me as a human being. He moved close but did not touch her. Please stay with me, Natalie. She knew she should have run away. Instead, she chose to stay with him. The night became a blur of confessions. Their deep talk led to an electric connection. His kiss was surprisingly gentle and careful. Her response released 6 months of loneliness. Are you certain? He asked against her lips. No, she admitted. But I cannot leave. He whispered for her to stay. And she did. The morning sunlight felt cruel and unfamiliar. She woke to his arm around her waist. Then the crushing reality of her choice hit her. She had slept with a powerful, dangerous man. What had she done to her life? She quietly gathered her clothes, her hands shaking. Leaving without a goodbye? Adrian's voice stopped her. He was awake, his sharp eyes watching her every move. In the light, he almost looked vulnerable. I have to get to work, she lied. Thank you for last night. She left before he could say another word. Her phone showed 6 missed calls from Marcus. His text message made her heart stop. We need to talk. It is very important. The meeting took place in Marcus's messy office. It smelled of old coffee and fear. He looked at her with pity in his eyes. That man from last night, Marcus began. Do you know his real identity? His name is Adrian, Natalie said softly. He said he solves problems for people. Natalie, he is Adrian Caruso of the Caruso family. The word mafia echoed in the small room. Natalie felt the color drain from her face. What are you talking about? She asked. He does not just know them, Nat. He runs them. Half the city fears him into paying for protection. Marcus leaned in, his voice urgent. What did you tell him about your life? Nothing. Everything. I do not know, she stammered. She could not think straight. Oh my goodness. You must get far away from him now. These men do not just break your heart. They break people to make a point. Marcus's face was serious. Promise me you will disappear. Natalie just nodded, her mind spinning. A mafia boss. She had slept with a mafia boss. For one night, she had believed in him. How could she have been so incredibly foolish? The following 2 weeks were a nightmare. Natalie lived in constant fear and regret. She changed all of her daily routines. She never answered calls from unknown numbers. Flowers arrived at her apartment without a card. One night, a black car waited outside her building. She hid for 3 hours until it was gone. She told herself she was being smart and careful. She would not admit she was also heartbroken. Work was the only thing that kept her sane. The simple tasks were a welcome distraction. She was an expert at burying her feelings. But some problems could not be ignored. It began with a deep exhaustion sleep could not fix. Then came the nausea every single morning. When her period was 1 week late, she blamed stress. 2 weeks late, she bought a pregnancy test. The 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Natalie sat on her cold bathroom floor staring at the test. This could not be happening. They had used protection. But she remembered they had not been careful. She had trusted him completely. She had forgotten that trust was a dangerous luxury. Now she carried the child of a mafia boss. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The first choice was simple. She would keep the baby. Natalie had never thought about being a mother. But seeing those lines sparked a fierce need to protect. This new life belonged only to her. The second choice was much more difficult. She could never tell Adrian about the baby. Men like him only understood control. He could easily find out everything about her. What would he do if he knew? He might take the baby to control her, or make her disappear to protect himself. She researched women who dated men in organized crime. The stories were all filled with horror. Threats and manipulation were common. Children were used to control them. Some women who tried to leave simply vanished. She refused to become one of them. A desperate plan began to form in her mind. She would move, change her number, and quit her job. She would vanish among the city's 8 million people. She would raise this baby completely on her own. It was a terrible plan, but it was her only choice. Finding a new place to live was almost impossible. Everything she could afford was tiny and falling apart. She finally found a small apartment in Queens. The ceiling had water stains and the neighbors were loud. But it was a place he would never find. Getting a new phone number was much easier. She promised to only give it to essential people. She blocked Adrian's number before throwing her old phone away. She tried not to think about his unread messages. Quitting her job at the club was the final step. Quitting her job was tough, as her boss Marcus looked genuinely heartbroken. Natalie lied, saying she just needed a change, not that she was running from a man named Caruso. The loneliness that followed was the hardest part. She cut ties with everyone, creating a prison of her own making to protect her unborn child. She now worked as an accountant during the day and at a small grocery store on weekends. Even with 2 jobs, she was barely scraping by, and the isolation was crushing. The pregnancy was exhausting but normal, yet fear was her constant companion. She was going to be a single mother in New York City, a secret weighing her down. Sometimes she wondered what might have been if the baby's father, Adrian, had been a normal, safe man. At her office job, her coworkers noticed her growing belly, but were too polite to say anything. But Rita, her manager at the grocery store, was much more direct, asking if Natalie had any support. The simple question almost made her cry. Small kindnesses from people like Rita helped her survive. Then, the eviction notice appeared under her door, and her world fell apart. The landlord was selling the building, giving all tenants 60 days to leave, 60 days to find a new home while pregnant, broke, and working non-stop. The desperate search for an apartment was fruitless. That night, she lay on her bathroom floor and wept, feeling the baby's gentle kicks like questions she could not answer. The next 4 weeks were a blur of desperation and exhaustion. She was rejected by 14 different landlords for being unstable or a liability. To save every penny, she began skipping meals and walking the 4 miles to work. Her body started to give out. One day, Rita confronted her, saying she needed to eat for the baby's sake. The words were true and terrible. As Natalie opened her mouth to argue, her vision faded, and everything went black. She woke up on the break room floor to Rita's worried face. Refusing an ambulance she could not afford, Natalie agreed to go to a nearby clinic. The doctor confirmed she was severely undernourished and anemic. Driving her home, Rita noticed the for sale sign outside the apartment building and finally understood. She offered a lifeline. Her cousin in Brooklyn rented rooms cheaply. The sudden, unexpected relief was so powerful that Natalie finally broke down and wept in the passenger seat. Pregnant, alone, and facing eviction, Natalie finally broke. Sobbing on a cold bathroom floor, she whispered apologies to her unborn child. Trying was no longer enough. Suddenly, a voice from the past 6 months shattered her despair. Through the stall, she saw expensive shoes. It was Adrienne. The door swung open. Adrian Caruso, the most dangerous man in the city, stared at her belly. "Is it mine?" he demanded. Too tired to lie, she whispered, "Yes." Fury filled his eyes. "You have known for 5 months," he said, his voice dangerously low. "And you said nothing." "You make problems disappear," she said, her voice shaking. "I had to protect us from your world." He finally saw the dark circles under her eyes. "When did you last eat?" he asked. "I am just trying to survive," she answered. "You never gave me the chance to help," he said softly. "Those other children were not mine," Adrienne stated firmly. "Did you really think I would let harm come to our baby?" His ultimatum was simple. "My driver is downstairs. Walk out with me, or I will carry you." "This is control," she shot back. "Exactly what I was afraid of." "Let me help, just until you are stable," he pleaded. She finally agreed, but with conditions. "I am not your prisoner. and you will not take the baby from me." The genuine hurt in his eyes was clear. "I would never," he promised. After a long pause, she took his offered hand. He took her to a stunning penthouse in Tribeca. The guest room alone was bigger than her entire apartment. Exhausted, she sank onto the bed. He returned with soup and toast. "Eat," he said gently. "You are very bossy," she managed. "And you are very stubborn," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Why did you really run?" Adrian asked quietly. Natalie confessed she was terrified of him and his world. She wanted a normal, safe life for their child, not one connected to a crime boss. He explained that his work was about protecting people and solving problems the police ignored. He insisted that while his methods were rough, he lived by a strict code. He never harmed innocents. She asked him if he killed people. "Yes," he admitted, his honesty more frightening than a lie. He asked if that terrified her. It should have. But instead, a strange sense of security settled over her. That night, alone in a luxurious room, pregnant with a dangerous man's child, she finally slept peacefully for the first time in months. She woke to the smell of coffee and found Adrian cooking breakfast. The domestic scene was confusing. He had already scheduled an appointment with the city's best doctor and had his assistant call her job. Natalie felt a flash of anger, telling him he had no right. To her surprise, he gave her a sincere apology, admitting he acted too quickly. They went to her old apartment to get her belongings. Adrian hired movers, insisting she not lift a finger. He looked around at the rundown apartment in disgust, calling it a death trap. "It was all I could afford," she said quietly. He apologized, but his worry for how she had been living was obvious. It was hard to argue when his logic was about her safety. She finally told him everything about the past 6 months. She spoke of the constant fear, the missed meals, and the utter loneliness. When she was done, Adrian apologized for making her feel so alone. He promised her that she and the baby would always be safe. His voice grew cold as he explained that his enemies understood that hurting his family meant their own inevitable painful end, and Natalie, against all logic, wanted to believe him. The doctor's appointment with Adrienne was a completely different experience. The clinic was modern, and the doctor was kind. When the ultrasound began, Adrienne instinctively reached for Natalie's hand, and to her surprise, she held on. Then on the screen, they saw their baby for the first time. When Adrian asked, the doctor smiled and announced, "It is a boy." Natalie turned and saw silent tears streaming down Adrian's face. Seeing this powerful, dangerous man crying with genuine joy began to melt the walls around her heart. He took her to a restaurant where getting a table was impossible. The host seated them instantly. She looked at the menu with no prices and asked if people always reacted that way to him. He said it was useful, but not nice. Then he got serious. He asked Natalie what she truly wanted, not what she thought she should want. The question was a dangerous one. She hesitated, then spoke from the heart. She wanted their son to be safe. He pushed again, asking what she wanted for herself. She finally met his gaze. She wanted someone who saw her as more than just a mother, someone who made her feel like she mattered. He told her she was never invisible to him. She confessed that he terrified her, but he also made her feel safer than she had in years. He simply said, "That is because I mean it when I promise to protect you." Adrian leaned in close. He knew his world was dangerous, but he promised he could protect her from the worst of it. He could give her safety and a stable life to build on. She asked what he wanted in return. "Nothing," he said. She was the mother of his child, and that meant she deserved everything. "What if I want more than just protection?" she started to ask. He finished her thought gently. "If you want me, you can have me, but on your terms. I am not going anywhere." Later, he explained why he had searched for her so desperately. He said the night they met, she made him want to be a better man. When she vanished, he felt he had lost his only chance at becoming someone good. Finding her was about knowing if that feeling was real. He continued, his voice full of regret. When he found her pregnant on that bathroom floor, he knew he had failed her completely. He understood why she ran admitting he was the monster she feared. She told him he was not a monster. He just asked for one chance to prove he could be the man she and their son needed. She took his hand, her fingers lacing with his, and said she was scared. He admitted he was too. He was terrified of failing her again, of his son growing up without a father, and of loving her only to lose her. She squeezed his hand. Maybe, she said, we can be terrified together. The weeks that followed found a quiet rhythm. He was a constant, respectful presence in her life, slowly breaking down her walls. She once found him at 3 a.m. with bloody knuckles. He simply said, "Don't ask," so she didn't. Life was surprisingly normal, but these moments chipped away at her defenses. She realized she was falling for the real Adrian, the dangerous but gentle man who made her breakfast. One night at dinner, a phone call changed everything. He took it in his office and his voice became sharp and cold. When he returned, his face was like stone. He admitted someone had challenged him, and he had to remind them why that was a bad idea. Natalie asked if anyone was hurt. He said no, but the message was sent. He turned to her and said plainly, "People will hurt you to get to me." He promised that anyone who touched her or their son would face death. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange sense of safety. 3 weeks later, leaving the doctor's office after seeing their son on the ultrasound, Adrian's entire demeanor changed. His hand gripped her arm. His relaxed mood vanished, replaced by a cold focus. "Get in the car now," he said quietly. He pushed her toward his car, telling his driver, Marcus, to take her straight home. She saw two large men get out of a black sedan as Adrian turned to face them. The car pulled away before she could protest, her heart pounding. She could only hope he knew what he was doing. Adrian finally came home hours later with split knuckles and blood on his shirt. He explained it was a message from the Vulov family, a Russian crew trying to move in on his territory. They showed up to prove they could get to her. He met her eyes and said he made it clear that even looking at her was an act of war. They would find the consequences he left for them. "Are we safe now?" she asked. He pulled her close and promised they were. But fear still found her in her nightmares. She woke to find Adrian watching over her. He confessed he was increasing security everywhere. He was terrified of losing her and their son. He admitted she had been right to run from him because his world was dangerous. She took his hand and said, "Then stop protecting me from the truth. Help me understand it, model." Finally, she asked him to explain everything. Adrian described the delicate balance of power that kept the city from all-out war. He told her about the Volkovs, a new crew who did not respect the old rules. They saw weakness where there was cooperation. "They think you are my weakness," he said, his eyes intense. "And they are right. You and our son are the only weakness I have. Their attempt to threaten you was a miscalculation. They thought it would make me back down. Instead, it showed me I have to eliminate them completely." "It means war," he said, his voice cold. "They crossed a line by threatening you, and that changes everything." "This war is for you," he said, his voice a low rumble. The weight of his world settled on her shoulders. "Promise me," she whispered, her hand on her belly. "When this is over, you will build a life our son can be proud of." He promised to try, to build something legitimate when the fighting stopped. For a few perfect hours, they were just a family. Then the war began. Their home became a gilded cage, and she barely recognized the man he became. "How bad is it?" she asked late one night. He insisted they were winning, that his people were safe. But then he made her promise. If he did not make it back, she and their son were to disappear forever. Fear was a cold knot in her stomach. Then, one Tuesday, it was all over. Adrian burst in, his face shining with victory. "We won," he said, pulling her close. "We are safe." But her relief was laced with a chilling suspicion. "How?" she asked. "What did you do?" He had taken an innocent man, a brother used as a bargaining chip. "I will never apologize for protecting you," he told her. She understood his reasons, but the coldness of his methods terrified her. This was the man she loved, a monster and a savior all at once. "How can you live with the things you have done?" she asked. He explained that he had to separate his feelings from his actions to survive. "But with you," he confessed, "I feel everything. You make me want to be better." She reminded him that their son would look up to him. He promised to teach their boy to build, not destroy. He swore he would build legitimate businesses, creating a legacy their son could be proud of. "This will take years," he said, "but I am starting today." He turned to her, his heart in his eyes. "I love you, Natalie. I love the man I become when I am with you." Her own defenses crumbled. "I love you too," she whispered. In the quiet of the afternoon, they held each other, a silent promise for a better future passing between them. Adrienne enjoyed a rare, peaceful moment with their unborn child. That peace shattered when a man named Antonio Marches arrived. He demanded Adrienne attend a commission meeting regarding the Vulov situation, completely dismissing Natalie's presence and her advanced pregnancy. Marches set the meeting and left without another word. Adrienne insisted it was only politics, but Natalie demanded to go. She was a part of his life now, for better or worse. He agreed, but gave her strict rules to keep her safe. At the meeting, 5 men judged Adrienne. They accused him of breaking protocol by attacking the Vulovs without approval. Adrienne calmly stated that they had threatened his family. He insisted he had simply solved a problem that endangered them all. "The commission demands a fine of $5 million and control of your ports." Adrienne's voice was ice. "Absolutely not. The ports are mine." He was told he acted without approval. "I acted to protect my family," he shot back. Natalie felt the room go cold, her heart pounding. Another man warned softly, "You're on a dangerous path, Caruso." Adrienne stood. "I will pay the fine. The ports stay with me. If you disagree, consider me outside your authority." The threat was a declaration of war. Finally, Marches gave a cold smile. "The ports are yours for now, but you have no more favors here. Cross us again, and there will be severe consequences." They left in a tense silence, his hand guiding her firmly to the car. Inside the car, he exhaled. "That was a mistake. I just challenged the entire commission." Fear filled his eyes. "I had to. The ports keep you safe. Without them, I'm weak, and weakness is a death sentence." Natalie took his hand. "Then we face what comes together." He held her close, whispering, "I'm terrified I'll fail you." She pulled back to look him in the eye. "Then be the man you promised. You said you'd go legitimate. Start tonight." "It's not that simple." "Nothing about us is," she replied. He kissed her, full of fear and hope. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "We do it your way. I'll build something our son can be proud of." He placed a hand on her stomach. "No more violence," he vowed. "I'm done being a monster." "You were never the monster. You were just scared," she said softly. "Now be brave." The next morning, Natalie woke up alone. She found Adrian in his office, finishing a phone call that had lasted 3 hours. He looked exhausted but determined. "That was my attorney in Milan," he explained, rubbing his eyes. "I'm buying a legitimate, publicly traded shipping company. The timeline is 6 months." He gestured to piles of paperwork. "We're making it work." "It's a start," he said. "I'm selling off my dirty operations. In 5 years, I want to be completely clean." Natalie massaged the tension from his shoulders. "This is necessary," he continued. "My empire is built on fear. The second I look weak, it's over." "So you're building something they can't touch?" "Exactly," he said. "Legal businesses have protections. It's harder to get rid of someone with shareholders." He asked how she was feeling. She smiled, admitting her 8-month pregnancy made her tired. "4 more weeks until he is here," she said, a wave of reality washing over her. "Are you scared?" she asked softly. He tensed. "I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father. My own was not a good role model." Natalie carefully asked what his father was like. After a long silence, he spoke in a flat voice. "Violent, cruel. He ruled through fear." When I was 12, I watched him kill a man. At 14, he turned on me. Natalie's hands froze on his shoulders. I killed him when I was 21, Adrian confessed. I made it look like a rival hit. He turned to her, his voice breaking. I swore I would never be him, but sometimes I see his eyes in the mirror. You are nothing like him, she insisted. How can you know? Because you are afraid of becoming him, she said, taking his face in her hands. Bad fathers don't worry about being bad. He pulled her close. I love you, he whispered. You and our son are everything. I love you too, she replied as they held each other in the morning light. The moment shattered when his phone rang. I have to take this, he said. In the kitchen, she found Marcus waiting, his face grim. Natalie, we have a situation. Her blood ran cold. What is it? Someone is watching you, asking questions about you and the baby. Marcus showed her photos of a man she had never seen. He is a professional. We don't know who hired him. Natalie clutched her stomach. Does Adrian know? Not yet. I wanted to warn you first. He's going to want a complete lockdown. Marcus was right. When Adrian heard the news, his decision was instant and final. Natalie was not to leave the penthouse. No exceptions. Not until the threat was gone. Adrian revealed that someone was watching Natalie. He forbade her from leaving their home, even for her doctor appointments. She felt like a prisoner, and they argued fiercely. Seeing the genuine fear in his eyes, she reluctantly agreed to his protection. You have 2 weeks, she stated firmly. He agreed, promising to find the man who was watching her. The doctor confirmed the baby would arrive in about 3 to 4 weeks. Later, they stood in the nursery, equally excited and terrified. She admitted she was scared, and he confessed he was too. He then revealed the man was a private investigator. He was hired by Antonio Marches, who was looking for a weakness to use as leverage against him. I won't kill him, I'll ruin him, Adrian said calmly. The plan was already in motion to destroy Marches's empire. This would be a warning. Tomorrow we disappear to the Hamptons until the baby is born. The move to the secure coastal house was swift. It was a beautiful home that his father had owned. He imagined raising their son there. For 1 week, they experienced a peaceful, almost normal life together. That peace ended with the phone call. The city penthouse had been ransacked by a professional crew. Though they were safe, it was a clear message. Adrian immediately moved her into a reinforced safe room in the basement. He moved Natalie to a secure bunker protected by 4 armed men. Adrian had to leave to confront the threat himself, promising he would return by nightfall. The hours crawled by as Natalie's anxiety grew into pure fear. Marcus the guard said Adrian was delayed. The attackers were a new enemy, not Marches. Natalie waited for hours, pacing anxiously. He finally returned at 3 in the morning, beaten and bloody. He said he found them, and the attack was deeply personal. He told her about his father, and how he had staged his death to look like a rival attack. His father's cousin had believed the lie and spent the last 12 years plotting revenge. Tonight, that revenge ended. The cousin and his crew were gone. He confessed he tried to avoid the violence, but he was left with no choice. He broke down, fearing he was becoming the very man he hated, his own father. What if our son sees me the same way? He cried. She held him tightly. You are not your father, she insisted, because you care, because you want to break the cycle. The man I know is good, and he is worth loving. He clung to her, the weight of his past finally lifting. When he looked up, his eyes were clear. It is over, he said. The last threat is gone. We are safe now, as safe as we will ever be. No more fighting, no more hiding in the dark. Just the 2 of us, our son, and our future. I will hold you to that promise, she said. Please do, he replied, and offered her his hand. Come on, let us go watch the sunrise. They walked to the beach as dawn broke. Adrian held her, his hand on her belly. For the first time, she felt truly hopeful. The baby kicked, and Adrian let out a real laugh. It was a beautiful sound of pure joy. He is excited to meet us, Adrian said. He has a few more weeks, she replied. Maybe he is impatient, just like his mother. As Natalie was about to answer, she felt it. A sudden rush of warmth, a sharp pressure. Water was running down her legs onto the sand. Adrian, she said, her voice filled with fear. I think my water just broke. His calm expression turned to instant panic. Now? But you have another 2 weeks left. Apparently our son has his own schedule. Another contraction hit, stronger than before. We need to go to the hospital right now. What came next was organized chaos. Marcus called the hospital to prepare them. Security guards rushed to get the car ready. Adrienne switched between being calm and panicked. They got to the car in record time. As they sped toward the city, Natalie held his hand. She tried to remember what her doctor had told her. You are both going to be okay, Adrienne repeated. It will be okay, Natalie groaned, the pain far worse than she had imagined. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Dr. Chen met them at the entrance. Hours later, through a blur of pain, their son was born. They placed the tiny, perfect boy on her chest. He had his father's dark hair. For a moment, their new family was the entire world. Then, the door flew open. Marcus shielded Natalie as Adrian blocked the baby from view. A security guard stood there. Mr. Caruso, we have a problem, he said. Men in the lobby are demanding to see you. They are claiming family rights. Adrian's face turned to stone. He looked at Dr. Chen. Discharge them now, he ordered. The doctor protested, but saw his resolve. 20 minutes, she agreed. Who are they? Natalie whispered, clutching their sleeping son. I will find out, Adrienne promised. Marcus returned with a tablet. Natalie saw a familiar, furious face. Antonio Marchus, Marcus confirmed. He claims the commission has authority. They have no power over my son, Adrienne stated. He then turned to Natalie. They say I am holding you against your will. I need you to prove them wrong. They'll say you were forced, he said, his voice low. It gives them a reason to come for us. Natalie looked at her newborn son, a protective fire igniting inside her. No one would ever use her child. All right, but you stay with me the whole time. Soon, they were discharged with a nurse named Elena. In the chaotic lobby, Marchus was waiting with his men. When the elevator doors opened, the room fell silent. Marchus, Adrian said, his voice sharp. You're trespassing. The man claimed he was there for Natalie's welfare. Adrian turned to her. Natalie, would you like to speak to him? She took a steadying breath. I am leaving because I want to, Natalie stated firmly. My son and I are safe and this is my choice. Marchus insisted she was being used and offered protection. I don't need it, she said, looking him dead in the eye. If you come near my son again, I will make you regret it. The threat silenced the room. Adrian stepped forward. You heard her. Get out of this hospital now. Marchus promised it was not over. You want to fight me in business, fine. Adrian's voice dropped. But you involved my family. You crossed a line. Marchus saw the look in his eyes and finally backed down. As he left, Adrian said quietly, It's already over. Can we go home now? Natalie asked. Back at the secured penthouse, their son slept. Adrian promised to build them a safe world. The first night with their beautiful, unnamed baby was a sleepless blur of exhaustion and love. A doctor soon declared both mother and baby healthy. In the quiet nursery, Natalie watched Adrian hold their son. They decided on a name, James Brooks Caruso, a name that joined both of their worlds into one new family. Their peace lasted for 6 days. Then, their security chief brought terrible news. A powerful group called the Commission filed a lawsuit claiming Natalie was a prisoner. Worse, the story was leaked to the city's press. They're trying to force my hand, Adrian said. He knew how to fight back. He knelt beside Natalie and looked at her. Marry me. It was not just a strategy. He truly loved her. Looking at their son, she whispered, Yes. They announced their engagement immediately. Natalie wrote her own statement. and the public narrative changed from a crime story to a love story. The lawsuit quickly collapsed. "We won," Adrian said. Now they could finally build their life together. He held her, promising to leave his old life. Within 3 to 5 years, he would be completely legitimate. He was even starting a foundation to help children, an idea she inspired. They finally found peace together. 3 months later, they had an intimate wedding at home. He vowed to be a man she and their son could be proud of. She chose their family and their shared future. A simple kiss sealed their new beginning. Their first year had challenges, but also perfect joys like their son's first steps. Adrian became a loving father. He poured his focus into their foundation, which launched on James's first birthday. He was a new man. With their 2-year-old sleeping, they looked at the life they had built. She remembered the hard times and her choice to stay. He thanked her for seeing the good man he could be. 5 years later, their life was wonderfully normal. She had her own firm. After picking James up from school, they shared a family dinner. She felt deep gratitude. Every difficult step had been worth it. Adrian watched their son sleep from the doorway. "I was thinking about another baby," he said softly. He assured her it was only a question. Natalie considered it. She pictured the chaos. But then she saw James as a big brother. "Yes," she agreed. "But let's plan it this time." Adrian pulled her in for a deep kiss. "Thank you," he whispered. He thanked her for a life worth living, and for loving him through his worst moments. For everything. Natalie smiled. "You saved me too. We saved each other." They stood together, holding on to the family they had built, a family whose love had survived every possible challenge. Natalie once felt utterly alone. She was terrified and pregnant, hiding from a man she thought would destroy her. But her fear eventually became courage. The man she saw as a monster turned out to be someone who just needed her to believe in him. Now she had a life she could never have imagined. She had a loving husband, a protected son, and a career she had built herself. Her life was not simple, but it was theirs, and she would not trade it. "Come to bed," Adrian said. "James will be up at 6 demanding pancakes." He joked he was still learning how to make them. As she fell asleep in his arms, Natalie remembered that scared girl, pregnant on a bathroom floor, thinking her world was over. Her younger self never would have believed this future was possible. But Natalie had learned that the best stories are not the easy ones. They are about people who fight for something better. They are about turning fear into strength and building families from broken pasts. Her story was one of those. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.